We were just walking through the contest area, and we have the craziest setup right now. It is Hack-A-Sat, and I'm guessing that means hack a satellite.
Yes, that's correct. Hack a satellite. I did have somebody come by yesterday and say, what is this, Hack Saturday? I said, no.
I mean, you have satellites set up. I didn't even know, like, this was a thing. I'm looking at the screens behind us, like, this is insane. Like, can we all acknowledge hacking a satellite is beyond web application, little network. Like, this is into some pretty crazy stuff. So can you just briefly describe, and it's a CTF, it's a competition, right?
It's more than just a competition. We do have a CTF for those hackers that are very advanced, but we also brought here to DEF CON this weekend the hands-on education and bringing some of the novice researchers interested up to speed so they can maybe someday participate in the CTF and compete.
So it's not just like you have to be an expert to compete. It's anyone can do it.
Yeah, so that's exactly right. So what we wanted to do is bring the whole awareness of what it takes to cyber resilient, if that's a verb, a satellite from the get-go, right? So designing it through launching it to operating it. So what you're looking at here, this is a good example, a visual of like a virtual machine. So before the satellite even gets into the hardware components, these software tools will allow you to figure out, okay, how should we orient the stuff inside the satellite? What kind of mission is the satellite going to do? What kind of architecture should we go for? So you can do a lot of troubleshooting here, which is obviously a huge cost saver, but then from here go on to okay, we're going to actually start putting these things together, right? So when you hear buzzwords about like digital engineering and things like that, that's an example of what this is. So bringing that awareness of, hey, satellite development, they just don't magically get up there. So like, how do we start from the get-go? What does it look like to present and develop one? And then also, how can we bake in resiliency from the virtual machine all the way through to launching the satellite?
What's so crazy to me is like everything you just said, like there's other CTF competitions, and there's like, capture packet, and some of them like take on this like almost like, or like Hack Fortress is a good example. I love Hack Fortress, but it takes on this like gamification where it's like a Caesar cipher or something like that, which you don't really come across those in the real world. So with this, you're like, this is simulating a real world satellite. It's not like a gamified version.
Yeah, and I also did want to hit on it too. As far as the CTF, for our final event coming up in December, it's a little more than that, right? So each team in our final event, 8 of them, they're going to have their own, copy of this, right? So they're going to be able to practice. And for this year, it's going to be an attack defend. So they're going to win points by taking out other competitors' satellites, taking that down, while also having to defend their own. So it's a little more than this structured CTF, that's very traditional. We're taking it kind of, giving them a path, and they can do how they want with it.
So it's totally like an attack defense game as well. Now, on a technical level, how does that kind of work? Like, everyone's remote. I'm guessing there's a lot of complications like that. Does it communicate more like virtual systems, or have you like simulated like if this was out there, like these are actually how they would communicate?
So yeah, it's going to be virtual remote, not to get into any competition sensitive information or whatever, but yeah, so it's going to feel very much like I was talking about when you're doing these sort of things with these virtual machines, it feels very real. So the operators, aka the participants, they're going to be at their home station, with their teams, and they're going to be remoted in, because when you think about space operations with a real satellite, that's remote anyway, because the satellite's in space and you're on the ground. So to them, it's going to feel very similar to what actual space operations feels like.
So question with space, you said it's going to feel like really like space operations. And again, you don't have to reveal anything confidential. But how bad is the latency? Like, have you had that baked into some of the communication where you push a change, and how long does it normally take for a change to occur?
Yeah, so when you talk about commanding space vehicles and talking to space vehicles, that's something that we're definitely baking in with the shout out to Cromulence, who's building our challenges, like world class, right? So when you're talking to a satellite, for example, a satellite in like low Earth orbit, you may get, a couple contacts a day, and those contacts could be just like, 10 to 30 minutes, or even shorter. So when you talk about latency, when you're in view of the satellite, the latency isn't terrible, but you also have a very narrow pipe, so you can't push too much information motion, but then you got to wait for that sucker to orbit the Earth before you can come back and talk to it again.
I think what you meant is not pipe, but it's the tubes, right? The tubes might slow down. No, I'm just kidding. So like, one question I have is like so much of this type of thing. I've never hacked a satellite. I can imagine most people at home have never hacked a satellite. What type of like vulnerabilities are we talking about? Is it like trying to crash the satellite into the atmosphere and light it on fire, or is it delays or communication, or can we not talk about any of this?
Well, we're looking at a number of different services that the satellite provides and the different components that are within the satellite. So the vulnerabilities can vary. I could talk a little bit about last year, some of the competition challenges that we had, like comms and payload, different components of the satellite that we would be examining for vulnerabilities.
So like, what was if we can talk about last year, what was the most incredible vulnerability that was found last year? Maybe even one that was unexpected.
I don't know if I have a good answer for that one.
I can hit on that a little bit. Nothing specific on the vulnerability, but kind of to showcase what is actually possible. Last year, the winning team actually took control of the satellite. We had a flat sat on an orbital, and for the win, to win the competition, they were able to actually manipulate the satellite to take a simulated a picture of a simulated moon. So they were actually able to get in and start controlling and adjusting the satellite for how they wanted to. So you can imagine.
Yeah, and then they also were able to submit commands to a real satellite and take the picture of the real moon. So if you go back and search Hackasat and look at our stuff last year, the winning team, they have a tweet with their team name and the picture of the moon that the commands they submitted ran on the real satellite.
There's no joke. I'm looking at Gowrie and he's nodding. That's insane. Like, I'm assuming they patched this thing, right?
So I don't want to get into too much of how they did it just for the sake, but the whole point, right, driving back as to why we're here. So you have the barrier to enter from an economic perspective of space is lowering constantly by all these people that are putting up stuff, right? So if you've got all these private citizens, these schools, these small companies able to put up satellites, how do we know that they are also being as forthcoming and cyber resilient minded as we are, right? Because space is a global thing. We all share it. So if you've got one guy who's haphazardly throwing up stuff, it's a threat to everybody. So we're really here to just make sure that, hey, you need to think about cybersecurity, and also best cybersecurity folks in the world here at DEF CON. So let's get them thinking about it, and how can we together make sure that space is protected, right? Because we need space every day. Whether you're a fan of the government or whatever or not, you still need to go to an ATM, you still need to use your bank card, you still need to use your cell phone. All of that is reliant on our space systems, and if we lose those, we're screwed.
That is incredible. Hey, I know there's incredible amount to talk about here, but thank you so much for your time. This is an incredible competition. It's not often you see competitions where you can get an EIP overflow in your basement and it's kind of exciting, but seeing the satellite move, taking pictures, having the virtualized environment is absolutely incredible. Thank you so much for sharing. Thanks for watching, and hack on. All right, one quick thing that we forgot to mention is how do you get involved? Whether it's Twitter, whether it's a website, and whether or not you want to look at previous competitions. So where can they find you on Twitter?
Yeah, so tweet, just search Hackasat, and it'll be at Hackasat, and then go to hackasat.com. That's probably the easiest way to get connected. We have all the links there, to include our GitHub link that has all of the previous challenge, to include the challenges and the solutions for them, right? So if you are a team or you want to start a team, go there, learn, and then be prepared to come play.